This video is brought to you by NordVPN. Use coupon code ResonantArc for a whopping 70% off a 3-year plan. Stick around after the video to hear more. The 90s was an amazing time for video games. The Super NES and the PlayStation completely dominated the decade. You know, they just don't make games like they used to. No, I don't have an objective way of measuring it. Games just aren't what they used to be. It's just a feeling, an emotion, a visceral reaction that I have. I really think there was something different about the way they made games back then that has just been completely lost today. There was a special magic, something that's hard to identify concretely. A few weeks ago, I started playing Dragon Quest XI, and I slowly started to feel a familiar feeling, an old reminiscence of an age gone by. Memories of simpler times began flooding back into my brain. With every new hour of gameplay, I almost couldn't believe what I was experiencing. Is this game, in all its HD, beauty, 3D graphics, and prolonged cutscenes, is this a 90s game? I've played a few games that have given me that kind of feeling lately, but none of them were super high-fidelity AAA games with large budgets. They're mostly games like Golf Story, Shovel Knight, Stardew Valley, and the like. In other words, pixel art indie games. It's no surprise that those kinds of games can rekindle an old flame in my heart because they're mostly games meant for people like me, people who grew up in the 90s. But to feel that attachment to a modern-day AAA large studio's flagship game, yeah, it's been a while. So let's just get to the point. While playing Dragon Quest XI, with every passing moment, I felt myself being completely drawn into the story. There was something so familiar about it all. The silent protagonist, the anime-like art style, the quest, the kingdom, the artifacts, the characters, every part of this game, aside from the visual and audio presentation, which is changeable by the way, more on that later, every aspect of this game is as close to the spirit of something I would have experienced back in the 1990s as anything I've played in the last 20 years since. And it's a AAA large budget game. How did they do this? And why isn't anyone else doing it? I mean, I know everything's gotta be all hip and woke and modern these days, but can't some of the AAA games be made like the great ones of decade? Increasingly, I've seen that the answer to that question is a resounding no. It's considered too risky, and companies are eager to court the budding teenagers and compete for their attention. Let me tell you, competing against games like Fortnite is no easy task for that demographic. The older game franchises have had to evolve, grow up as it were. Take, for example, Final Fantasy 15. Final Fantasy has been stuck in a rut as of late. It has no identity, it has no clear direction. Compared to Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy is like a ship sailing aimlessly, desperate to reclaim the glory of its former self, simultaneously questioning what its former self really even was in the first place. And maybe that's the problem. What is Final Fantasy? What is it? During the development of Final Fantasy 15, we heard whispers of an illness aptly named Final Fantasy disease. You see, the problem is, developers all had their own idea of what a Final Fantasy game ought to be and what elements are necessary to any good Final Fantasy game. In some ways, this is a problem of the company's own making. Fans disagree on what Final Fantasy is. Developers disagree on what Final Fantasy is. Why? Because, seriously, what is Final Fantasy anymore? Like, what is it? A loose collection of magical fantasy stories from other worlds? Is that really all that ties these games together anymore? You see, Final Fantasy takes risks, big risks. Sometimes they pay off, sometimes they don't. But Final Fantasy is always changing. They keep making things different than they used to. Imagine, if you can, what Final Fantasy 16 has in store for us. No idea? Yeah, me neither. Battle system, setting, story, themes, art style? Nothing. I got nothing. I have no idea what Final Fantasy 16 will have in store for us. Now, imagine, if you will, the next Dragon Quest. Let me guess. Akira Toriyama type art style?
Yep.
Turn-based battle system?
Yep.
Medieval fantasy setting?
Most likely.
Bring it on.
The truth is, Final Fantasy is unpredictable, and Dragon Quest is quite predictable. The problem with predictability is that the boundaries are too rigid, whereas unpredictability has boundaries that are, well, non-existent. Final Fantasy is really hard to categorize, and I think that's finally starting to wear on me. Dragon Quest knows what it is and is very comfortable with itself. Final Fantasy, well, you get the point by now. Dragon Quest games are so directly and unquestionably a part of the same series that changes will be kind of difficult going forward. Luckily for the fanbase, drastic change isn't something the developers seem to want to push for. Yet, the grass is always greener on the other side. Many fans of Final Fantasy are hoping for a return to what they consider to be normalcy, to stability, to the 90s. You know, there used to be something of a rivalry between the Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy fanbases. Somehow the detractors of both have unwittingly fallen into the camp of the other. Final Fantasy fans like myself hoping for a return to form, a Final Fantasy VII remake, a turn-based battle system in a new mainline Final Fantasy game, have somehow avoided playing Dragon Quest games all this time. I mean, I played a couple back in the day, but they never really did it for me. Yet playing Dragon Quest XI was an incredible revelation for me. Games are still being made like this. What I once thought of as stale and not worth playing, I now value as a framework for modern video games. It is possible to make a successful AAA 90s game in 3D with HD graphics in today's day and age. I now know it's possible because I just played it, and it has been the most refreshing and nostalgic experience I've had playing a game in a long, long time. The game isn't perfect though, oh no, not by a long shot. The more I played the game, especially through a long stretch in the middle, the more I found little things here and there to complain about. The portrayal of certain characters, some of the voice acting, some of the character designs and story decisions. Yet, each time I had a gripe, I looked back into my mind and found that these same types of things were present in 90s games too. Flamboyant characters and dialogue and poetic riddles, straightforwardness and plot devices. Sometimes this was a bit of an exercise in be careful what you wish for, because this is a 90s game. Completely. Cheesy dialogue, annoying characters, and all. But you know what? I don't care. I don't care. Because this is a AAA 90s game in 2019. Enjoy it. Savor the moment, because with how long Dragon Quest XI took to make, we may not be seeing Dragon Quest XII for quite some time. I said I would mention the 2D 16-bit mode for Dragon Quest XI. It's awesome, and I wish more companies would do it, but the truth is, most companies can't do it. Playing the 2D version of Dragon Quest XI is just like playing a classic SNES RPG from the 90s. It would fit in perfectly in that era. Dragon Quest XI is a 90s game, it just simply is. It's a 90s game made in the year, 2018, 2019 for the Switch. That's when I played it. A demake like this would end up being a completely different game if done for most modern games I've played in the past several years. However, this feature only gets a side note here in this video because, much to my own surprise, I didn't really play it all that much. It was clear to me that the game was meant to be played in the 3D mode. Honestly, I just wanted the 16-bit art style to make the game feel more like a classic 90s RPG. But, even more honestly, this game does not need a 2D mode to feel like a 90s game. It just is one. Plain and simple. The 90s was such an awesome time. I think many Final Fantasy fans who looked down on Dragon Quest for so long are now longing for new Final Fantasy games to be more like Dragon Quest. Fans of Dragon Quest get what they want. Fans of Final Fantasy, well, not always. As for Dragon Quest XI, problems and all, it is a 90s game in all its flawed beauty. If you were ever wondering what would have happened if games were still made the way they were back then, just with better graphics and camera controls, look no further than Dragon Quest XI. It isn't perfect, but it carries with it something valuable, something I hope continues for a long time. It carries with it the spirit of my childhood, the spirit of the 90s. This video was sponsored by NordVPN. Hide your internet activity from prying eyes and protect the data that you send and receive online. Go to nordvpn.com/resonantarc. Use coupon code ResonantArc to get 70% off a 3-year plan of NordVPN. Yeah, that's 70. The deal comes down to only $3.49 per month. Plus, you get an additional month free. Their servers are fast and operate in 60 different countries. If you're someone who travels often or uses airport and coffee shop public Wi-Fi, you're in danger of having all your private data exposed to anyone and everyone nearby. NordVPN services even extend to Netflix and your favorite entertainment websites, allowing you to unlock hidden content only meant for certain countries. As we move further into the information age, the need for a VPN keeps getting greater and greater. Don't leave your personal information where others can find it. Protect yourself with NordVPN. Find a link in the description of this video or simply go to nordvpn.com/resonantarc and use the coupon code ResonantArc, one word, to get 70% off a 3-year plan. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic day.